Hello, folks. Welcome to this session as part of TMP's Media Week. We have perhaps slightly ambitiously tried to cram into 1 week a series of sessions that is everything that B2B marketers need to know about the world of media today. All of these will be available on demand after the week's concluded as well. So if you want to jump onto our website, register for any of those, you'll get access to the recordings. I'm particularly looking forward to the topic of search. I'm not particularly an expert in search, but I think this is going to be a great grounding in how that is changing. So that's taking place on Thursday. But today I think we've got something that is really central to the overall theme of the week, which is around attention. Because I think there's one question about how might you capture attention, which thought leadership is a really great answer for. There's also another question about what you do once you have the audience's attention. What do you want to be known for? So that's why we've angled this session completely around the topic of thought leadership, and delighted to have Joel Harrison and Catherine Evans with me today on this call. Joel, Catherine, it'd be great maybe just to start us off with a quick intro to yourselves, but also perhaps an example of something that you've seen out there that you think resonates, you think is a really interesting example of thought leadership today. So maybe Catherine, if you'll start us off.
Great. Thanks, Paul, and hello, everybody. I'm Catherine Evans. I head up the B2B sales team at the FT, so I look after all the B2B sectors. It falls under my remit. Let's have a think about a piece of thought leadership that I'm particularly proud of at the moment. I would say is one from one of our clients in the energy sector, which is Iberdrola, and we've just launched with this campaign, and it's a really nice way of looking at thought leadership in terms of gamified content. So not the traditional sort of long form content that we might have traditionally used, but really engaging with the reader in a gamified way to get them to take the role of a clean energy commissioner for Europe, and then go through a series of questions and challenges to see whether they're making the right decisions or not. So it's a nice way of educating the audience, talking about a serious topic, engaging people like with the content, but without being or just in a new, exciting way. So I think that's something that has particularly captured our attention at the moment.
Brilliant, thanks, Catherine. And yeah, I'm fascinated to hear a few more examples of how the FT is responding and helping brands to, perhaps in a world that's where thought leadership, trust, truth have never been more in question, helping brands to navigate that and take advantage of what is such a trusted publication. So I think that'll be fascinating. And Joel, an introduction, an example from yourself.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, hi, I'm Joel Harrison. I'm one of the founders of B2BMarketing.net and Propolis and the B2B Marketing Awards and lots of the stuff that around that kind of brand historically, although increasingly working more as an influencer and podcaster and author myself at the moment. In terms of the topic, it's very prescient because got a podcast that I've put live that's going live tomorrow, which is in response to one of the winners of the B2B Marketing Awards category on thought leadership, which is from Circana, who are a consumer data intelligence platform. And it's not in the same way as Catherine's example, which is innovative and pushing the boundaries. This is a really, really solid piece of work in terms of using reams of data and turning that into storytelling, making it accessible, and then trying to deploy those within the sales conversation as well. So it's not necessarily an example of demonstrating huge amounts of innovation, but it's a really, really well executed, well worked example. And I think some of those, whilst we need the innovation as well, we also need to get some of those fundamentals right, which is great to see.
No, that sounds like a fascinating one, and I think people who are in that data and information space maybe have a slight edge when it comes to being able to produce thought leadership, because the example I was going to pick out is years and years ago, so hopefully people won't remember this one, but it was really great. A company called SAS, who are in the analytics space, and something they did that I've always admired, they wanted to show the audience the power of data and analytics and how it could be made actionable. But instead of doing the usual, dry white papers, etc., they took a whole load of data about global cities, so every city around the world, every major center, and they created a tool online that anyone could go to put in their personal preferences, the things they were really excited by, and it would spit out at the end of it the recommendation of the top 3 cities for you to go and live in. And I loved it because it was interactive. To your point, Catherine, it had that kind of educational feel to it. It was entertaining as well, but it really showed the power of data and how you could organize things. So I thought it was a great blend of thought leadership and, yeah, if you like, entertainment. So it's always stuck with me. But Joel, you mentioned that was one of the winners of the awards this year, and again, that's something I'm quite excited to hear about from you, is your view on the trends that you've been seeing in award entries and how people are using thought leadership. So be great to jump into your point of view on that.
Fantastic, great. Looking forward to it. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now, and hopefully this all works.
Fingers crossed.
Okay, can you see that?
Perfect. Thanks, Joel.
Excellent. There we go. Okay. So thanks very much, Paul and Joe, for inviting me to come and speak at this session. And delighted to talk about what does great thought leadership look like in 2025. Nice, simple topic that. And it's handy and prescient because, as I mentioned in the intro, whilst I'm a founder of B2B marketing, I'm kind of increasingly working separately from the business with the aim of writing a book specifically on thought leadership. And as part of that, I've been doing a deep evaluation of the entries in all of the B2B marketing awards categories, all 500 entries or so, but particularly in the thought leadership category, because that's where I'm focusing my attentions. So lots of stuff that's been pulling out from this. So really great to share some of these things with you over the course of this 15 minutes, and love to take questions afterwards as well. Thought the best way to start is to think about what the B2B Marketing Awards is, and it's a celebration of everything that's great about B2B marketing. And you can see, hopefully, I use the word euphoria politely, that is expressed on the recipients of this particular trophy's faces on getting their award. You can see it matters a lot to people, and it's a great night. Hopefully, if you've been there, then I hope you've enjoyed it. If you haven't been there, it's a bit like what they say about the 1960s. It probably, if you can't remember, if you can remember it, then you weren't really there. I think the two gentlemen on the right hand side I draw your attention to, particularly the one on the one in from the right, looks like he's just scored the winning goal at Wembley, and the guy on the far right hand side looks like some kind of religious experience. So you don't have to be intoxicated to enjoy a good awards night, but it does help. But it doesn't also underplay the kind of seriousness of which people take the whole program, and the kind of their desire to win these awards and the importance that matters to them. So just a bit of detail about that. The program runs for the course of the whole year. We have about 500 entries a year, as I say, and we get entries from across the whole B2B marketing space. It's judged purely by CMOs and marketing leaders, taken mostly from our Propolis program, and there's 150 judges over 2 stages, and then we announce the awards and award the ceremony, the trophies at a euphoric ceremony in November. It's all very, very good fun, but there's underplaying it. There's lots of really great messages. So I just want to again talk a little bit then about kind of some vital statistics from that category itself, just to help frame up who's using thought leadership. You can see that about a quarter of the entries came from professional services, slightly less from tech. That's interesting. I don't know if you're a aficionado of B2B marketing more generally. Tech tends to be leading in everything in B2B, but not so much in professional services. So that's quite interesting. You can see they generally use research, which is great. Huge budget range from 20K to $1 million. That's a very, very big range. And it does show that it's applicable at whatever a budget stage you're operating at. You can see how the budgets are allocated there. You can see the different kind of audiences that are represented in this campaign as well. But I think I just want to draw your attention to the final line, which is the measurement line. And this is going to come up again in what I say later on, because thought leadership is often seen as a brand orientated top of funnel activity, or certainly historically has been. But I think more and more it's being recognized as having a role in mid-funnel, in perhaps more demand generation activities. But what's more valuable than that, I think, and again, we'll come back onto this, is actually it's increasingly being recognized and designed with bottom of funnel activity in mind and resonance in mind. And I think if you're not doing that, then you're missing a trick. That's a really critical aspect of it. It's not shown here because given the timelines of B2B selling, we didn't have much data on that, and we wouldn't expect people to be able to show much in the way of revenue within this when they entered the awards. That was about a year ago now, so hopefully this campaign's have a lot better idea about that. But you can see that most people are looking at brand, but not far off that is pipeline. Okay, so I think the question for me, and I know that Catherine's going to talk about this a lot more later on, but why thought leadership? And for me, it's clearly because B2B has a trust issue. Selling complex and expensive B2B products and services requires trust. It's always been challenging, but it's becoming more and more challenging. And if you've read the Edelman Trust Barometer report this year, you'll see that trust is generally had taken a massive hit across all aspects of society and the economy, and people are generally less trustful than they were before. But then moreover, in B2B organizations, the B2B sales conversations, whilst we have wonderful organizations at the FT that do a fantastic authoritative job of talking the truth and being authoritative in the coverage that it has, there's so much content out there. And there has been for years. It's gradually accelerating and ramping up, and AI is just making a bad problem much, much worse, allowing people to generate content that looks much more authoritatively, much quicker, and with much less veracity and authority behind that. So buyers are faced with this kind of avalanche of content, media fragmentation. Where do they turn to? What do they look at? So there's this latent trust issue, and thought leadership is a way of having, for me, is a way of illustrating or demonstrating your trust and building that over a concerted time with your buyers. And we can talk about what good leadership looks like. I hope that'll come across during the course of this next 10 minutes or so. And we also looked at what kind of trust issues B2B brands are facing when they enter the awards. And you could divide these down to 3 areas. And the first one was expertise trust. So that's around how this company got the credentials to talk about this topic. Can they show the knowledge and expertise in this area and are they talking about something different? That was about half of the roughly half of the entries they received. Then it's about market trust. This is about moving into a new area. It could be geographical, it could be a new product area. It's when you're developing the business in that particular way. And implementation is really around, can you actually prove your ability to deliver this? It's beyond the theoretical, it's actually moving into the practical. So these are the 3 types of trust challenges that B2B brands are facing that we could see across the entries. And also then, how did they seek to address those? Well, you could see there are 4 primary ways of doing this. And you can also, the more observant amongst you will notice straight away that this doesn't add up to 100, and that's because they're clearly seeking to use different combinations of these tools to drive trust. Evidence base is obviously about demonstrating your ability to drive this, or is about your ability to talk authoritatively on the area. Relationships is about drilling down deeply and getting ongoing activities, whereas things like social trust is actually about building, is about kind of things like creating case studies in advocacy and things like that. So there are lots of different tactics that come to play and a combination thereof that are useful in addressing these challenges. So hopefully that kind of sets a scene. There's loads more data here, and obviously we've only got 15-minute session, so I've cut it to that. But what Paul and Joe also asked me to talk about is to look at 2 different aspects. One was, how are B2B brands winning in thought leadership? What trends can we identify? So I've tried in this section to look at 4 trends that we can see from the entries and allocate those to a particular campaign and a particular brand in terms of how the campaigns were structured and what they were trying to achieve from those. And what you will see from these is that, and there's the first 4 trends, there'll be another 4 trends following that. You will see that these trends overlap with each other and they repeat, but they're just seen from a slightly different angle. And I feel what it does is it starts to pull together a really clear view about what good looks like in terms of these campaigns. So the first one is from Circana. It's the one I mentioned earlier on, and this is a campaign called Data-Driven Demand Signals. And the thing we're seeing here is great storytelling rooted in data. So you will have brands that have got what we saw from the slide earlier on. The majority of great thought leadership utilizes data, and companies like Circana that are an insight company are blessed with having loads of data, but sometimes actually putting that in an accessible, digestible, compelling format is easier than it sounds. So turning this complex data to compelling narratives is absolutely critical. And the podcast I've got going live tomorrow with Ananda Roy, he's a VP of thought leadership there. He talks about how they do this and creating clear storylines from this kind of realms of stuff to make it really obvious in the meeting what we're talking about and what the implications are. And his point to me was, if they go over the meeting needing to cogitate further on this, he doesn't feel he's done his job properly. So it has to be really, really compelling and clear, and allow those insights to become clear opportunities and make them accessible and actionable. So, I mean, of course, storytelling is relevant across all of B2B, but sometimes it's easier to do than others. We're always striving to make the complex simple. This is an example where something is very complex that needs to be made much more accessible. Okay, the next trend I'm going to talk about is if I can see it properly, because one of the windows is across my track. This is practical application tools, and this is taken a great example of this is building trust and data sharing by Capgemini. This got the gold in the B2B Marketing Awards thought leadership category, and this is really probably more about mid-funnel activity, so slightly less, and it does actually relate very much to, I would say, what Catherine, it sounds like what Catherine was mentioning earlier on. We're using interactive tools to assess data sharing readiness, practical frameworks for implementation, and benchmarking tools with specific guidance. So you're making it very practical, making it very usable. You're getting beyond a static report, which is which may be impenetrable, maybe deep, and you're trying to and a bit impenetrable and a bit daunting to look at, and making it something which people can readily engage with. And this is something which Capgem, again, I've got a podcast coming out on this episode as well. They strive to do this and to kind of dig into the detail and make people engage with the content along the way. Having these practical tools is a really powerful way of making your campaigns much more compelling. Certainly in that, I think in that kind of probably that demand generation mid-funnel, but possibly elsewhere as well. So then we also, I teed up earlier on, increasingly the power and the resonance of thought leadership is about making it relevant in that sales conversation, which isn't always done. It's often paid lip service to. And I know that, Paul, you'd have had conversations with people over the years around sales and marketing alignment and what good looks like. It always, good always seems to be get them in early, get them to get their collaboration in creating the content in the first place. But also, and that applies in terms of campaign planning. This example here is for Intel. It's by an agency called Man Bites Dog, and they've got multiple content layers. They've strived to kind of create multiple content layers deployable across the buyer journey. They've also got sector-specific reports. So what you might say, well, that's a generic finding. How does it apply to me? They're really trying to drill down into the nuances of how that is relevant in particular environments to give sales meaty things they can talk to people about. And they're creating advisory boards for ongoing engagement. You could also say, I know that increasingly we're also seeing some of the previous slide in terms of visualization is coming across relevantly here, because you can also engage customers with interactive tools at that level as well. But that wasn't so much what they did in this instance. However, I think the general point applies. That sales enablement, that sales alignment needs to be considered right at the outset. And then the final one in this section was what got the silver at the B2B Marketing Awards, which is Fueling Our Future by PwC. And this is about sophisticated integration of measurement. Now, again, measurement's applicable across all things in B2B marketing, but actually it's quite hard to do. And one thing that we find, or it can be very challenging. And one thing that we find in the B2B Marketing Awards is that people will say, well, we're set out to achieve a brand objective. And yet when we ask them to validate how successful they were, they talk about all the MQLs they developed. So this, indicates that if what you're doing is using thought leadership as a big idea and you're spreading it across multiple channels and outlets and disseminating it and utilizing it over a long period of time, you need to make sure you measure everything comprehensively and demonstrate effectiveness across that. And so sophisticated integration of multiple metrics across different channels and objectives. And this is a great example of that. This is what the judges highlighted. It was a case in excellence of doing really demonstrating how they've succeeded across all the investment they made. And there wasn't just hit and hope activity that we spend here. It'll create some visibility, but we're not quite sure what impact it's going to have. So that section was designed to show some trends in terms of what kind of campaigns look like, or how brands were developing campaigns that were successful. I was also asked to look at what buyers want and what really engages them, and that naturally falls more down to the content which is being created. It has more of a content onus on things. So I've also identified four further trends as regarding this. And the first one of these is from UBS Asset Management, and this is about integrated content ecosystems. So again, we talked about the need for these campaigns to be deployable across multiple channels and of a protracted period of time, and it's about trying to create these and trying to create a thread of activity and consistency and mutual viability across all the different channels, which makes the whole greater than the sum of the parts. So it's about combining digital and physical channels. It's about very coordination and orchestration across multiple channels and formats, and trying to bring kind of perhaps offline activities alive, or digital activities alive within digital events. In this example, they had this interactive LED animations in their event, which was a center point of the campaign. So this is a great example of this. It's thinking about these campaigns as ecosystems rather than isolated acts of content, which might include a big report, but it might not. The second trend to identify here is prominent use of audio and video. Now, video, we're all increasingly comfortable with creating video within our campaigns, and we're seeing it more and more. Interesting, 50% of the campaigns in this category use video, but we're seeing it more and more used. I think that's quite surprisingly low. I think we're going to hope to see more and more of that, and we'll come on to talk about that a bit later on. But it's incredibly powerful within the marketing mix, and it's definitely moving away from that notion of just a big report being the kind of primary thing that people are deploying. I think what's really exciting is the use of, or the amount of potential is the use of podcasts in this area, because I think they act on a personal level, and you can take that media and that message literally with you and consume it potentially in an environment where you're more relaxed and more susceptible and more engaging with content as well. So we're seeing these kind of less text-based, less desk-based formats becoming more prevalent and more impactful. And this is an example again from Man Bites Dog. The brand's GHD, which is not the hair straightener company, by the way, in case you were wondering. I couldn't tell you what they do, but it's nothing to do with hair straightening. That shows the power of that brand, doesn't it? The next trend I wanted to talk to you about was about consumer grade entertainment value, and this is building what we've seen before. This is a great example from Verizon, and with this we're talking about documentary style videos. It's about behind the scenes content, and all looking at this with high quality production value. So we're moving B2B, moving into a B2C world where you're expecting Netflix style content that is really, really sophisticated and slick, and that makes it more compelling. You can consume it in a more relaxed frame of mind. There are obviously costs associated with that. We're seeing it happening more and more. And if this is your big long idea, then it's worth investing in doing that. Is it replacing the PDF? I haven't established that, but I think it's definitely something which is complementary and allows people to consume that content with a different mindset, a different environment, a different frame of reference. So, and we're seeing this again. This is a trend which we're seeing across the whole B2B awards, but it's particularly prevalent in this thought leadership category. And the last one, again, it replicates, it does echo back on the point about interactive tools. We're seeing this example is from ServiceNow, and it's their EMEA Customer Voice campaign, interactive data visualization engagement, to bring out. They had a wealth of data from this survey, so they had the kind of tyranny of too much data and how do you deploy it properly. They used an interactive microsite to explore trends. They used a customizable data dashboard, and they created infographics. So trying to make that surface all that data in an accessible way, not make it intimidating, make it useful, and allow it to be deployed at every stage of the thought leadership campaign. Because it creates the proof points that it demonstrates are really, really powerful. So I'm aware that I'm just about out of time now. To the last point around those different kind of campaign integrations, you can see that most of the campaigns that were in this category used a lot of different media channels. So it clearly is people seeing it, recognizing that it's important to provide this across the whole piece. It's not just about a single campaign or a single activity. The last thing I'll leave you with is, if you'd like more about on thought leadership, you can subscribe to my podcast. So there we are. Paul, thank you.
Thank you very much, Joel. And we can see now why you're a believer in the podcast format. But yeah, absolutely, it'd be great in a few minutes to dig into some questions around that, Joel, as well. I mean, one of the things where even at the start you outlined where the gap sits, and you talked about that there's an expertise aim behind this, but there's also an implementation aim. And I was reminded of a failed attempt. I think it was about the same time that I thought Second Life was going to be the big thing, to introduce an alternative to thought leadership that was going to be action leadership, where I was going to say, not everyone needs to be a thought leader. Sometimes you just need to show that you're the ones who can get things done. But anyway, yeah, that's another buzzword that hasn't happened as yet. But yeah, it would be great to dig into some questions, and also I think really nice to tee up your presentation, Catherine, because I guess in a way what Joel's run through is why are organisations looking at thought leadership, what type of goals are they setting, how are they going about that. But I think from the FT's perspective as a really premium publisher in the market, be very interesting to see how you're looking at supporting the brands who are kind of wanting to associate in that world. So be great if you can tee us up, Catherine.
Great. Thank you. I'm very happy to do so. And it's great to see that quite a few of those winners referenced there are actually brands that we work with at the FT all the time. So there's a really nice link there. Right, so I shall share my screen. And here we go. So although I can't promise, I'm not going to start off with a big crazy photo of people euphorically celebrating, but I do have a picture of Taylor Swift in the presentation, so that will keep people going for a little bit.
That and the Pikachu one were my favourites, I think, Catherine.
Yeah,
it's not sharing just yet, actually. I don't know if you've got a different screen open.
Let me know if it's.
But yeah, I think the Pikachu one distracted me more than Taylor Swift. That says about my age, or what my daughter's into, perhaps.
Is it starting to share now?
No, strangely not. Hold on. It's the delights of Zoom, isn't it? When this
all right.
this happens.
My apologies. Right. So here we go.
Yeah. Perfect. Yes, that's working great. Thanks, Catherine.
Okay, 1 second, just so I've got my view. Okay, is that working?
Yes, fantastic. Thank you.
Perfect, off we go then. So just to recap again, hello everybody, my name is Catherine Evans. I head up one of the commercial teams at the FT, focusing on B2B. And my role, as Paul kindly said there, is almost like take one step back from what Joel's just talked about, and really to think about exploring the environment in which that thought leadership resides. So what we believe at the FT is that if the environment is not authentic, then there's really little chance that brands will be able to feel the benefit of the messages that they're trying to portray. And as we've sort of referenced already, in a world where trust is not a given, the role of curating, building, and then retaining that trust becomes absolutely essential. So first and foremost, at the FT, our editorial team really live and die by the principle of without fear and without favour. And it really is that guiding force that leads our journalists to check facts and then report on the truth. And it leads them to consistently win awards for their investigative work in search of that truth. And the values and principles of the paper, which also translate through to the commercial side of the business as well, have really remained in situ and the same since our inception in 1888. And even now in 2025, it's really more important than it's ever been. So thinking about the news agenda in 2025, if you were to talk to anyone in the newsroom across the world, what that looks like, and especially after the events of recent weeks, I think we can really sum that up in one word. And that word at the moment is Trump. And we can really see that Trump story is driving two major shifts in the news environment. So the first is really an entanglement of business and politics and technology. And these three are really interwoven in a way that they've never been before. So think about the pictures of the tech bros a couple of weeks ago at the inauguration. Think about how politics is really driving those real concerns about the stability of free markets and trade. And then there's AI that's just across everything and is really quite pervasive. And then the second major shift is that polluted news ecosystem where really the only certainty is uncertainty. So thinking about stability, globalization, all of that being under threat. And for us, that avoidance of news is very real. Facts, I think, are also under threat as well. But additionally, we're seeing really strong indications that news really is in demand, particularly in our world. So we are seeing at the FT really strong peaks in both our readership and our subscriber numbers. And that's really reflective of the fact that the FT's audience is one that really cannot avoid the news. So they need news to do their jobs. We see it as our job and our responsibility to provide that. So we stand for that fact-based journalism in a world that needs to make better decisions. And within that, trust has never been more important. And just recently, our newspaper, the FT, was voted #1 trusted media brand by a digital report that was produced by Reuters. That was just last year. So I think we can see that brand trust and that transfer of trust has never been more vital, especially in the marketing world. But it's more than just a feeling. So at the FT, we work really, really hard on producing that news product and earning, first of all, and then maintaining, crucially, the audience's trust. So, and in these turbulent times, that really increases the need for news that you can rely on, especially for readers and our audience that are using that information to make huge business decisions. But for the audience here today, so many of you will be marketers and decision makers. Why should you care about trust? As long as your ad's in front of the right audience, whether on the FT or elsewhere, is that all that matters, or is there more to think about? Another thing about trust is we really know that it's passed on, and a trusted media source can really rub off on our partners. So we did a piece of research last year in partnership with a B2B agency called Together. And what we found was really interesting. 63% of decision makers agree that using trusted media improves the perception of partners. So the environment in which your media is showcased is really vital. But there's more as well. So crucially, the impact of trust delivers measurable business results. And in fact, it's been proven to deliver profit. So looking back to 2012, there was a study from the IPA that looked at the correlation between trust and very large profit. And in that first study, trust came bottom of a list of 7 metrics that had impact on profit. And then fast forward that to 2024, and you can see that clear impact on growth. And it's now the second in terms of importance, with only quality taking pole position. So whilst trust doesn't impact awareness so much, it is massive for attitude. And if you put an ad in a trusted context, people have a higher preference for that brand. And you can see from the bottom chart, even though it might be quite small, and I can share the slides later, that there's a real correlation between trust and large profits. So we can't talk about trust without speaking about fake news, and confidence has been really shaken in the advertising environment because of the impact of fake news. Even honest advertising can sit uncomfortably alongside questionable content. And some of that fakery can and does rub off on the brand. And by the same token, advertising along trusted content from bona fide news organisations can really help to enhance that trust in the brand. Here we go with the Taylor Swift image. So a couple of examples here to prove this point, and also a great quote by Mark Twain there. So I think we all know that AI is pervasive in fake news, and the BBC reported this news story about Trump using AI-generated images of him, like posing with a group of people that he'd never met. The image is completely false, but it was widely spread on Twitter, X. And then TikTok reported that Taylor Swift had called Florida a racist state. The FT flagged the story to TikTok, and it was later removed, but not before that story had been picked up by Twitter and widely shared. But the key point to this is not news, and TikTok and X are not news brands. Real news brands make positive impact, and that's a really important point to bear in mind. So lots of fake news, lots of misleading news, and we've seen that trusted news brands massively impact profit. But the challenge that CMOs face is that news advertising has huge impact on profit, but there's a ton of fake and misleading news around. So you might be wondering how to address this. So how can you protect your brand and keep it safe? And what we hear a lot from clients is presenting us with negative keyword lists. But what I want to do is potentially challenge whether that is actually the answer. So if you pick a really strong news partner and protect your brand with a negative key list, is that going to solve your problems? Is that the answer? So here are a couple of examples that suggest that perhaps it's not the one you're looking for. So the headline here on the left-hand side, just for Paul's benefit, is it selfish to run a marathon? And this was blocked on the keywords news, accident, cancer, suck, and it prevented the news article from being shown 130,000 page views. So not just impressions, but page views. The second one, how solid-state batteries could transform transport, was blocked on the keywords Chinese, news, and fires. So a massive 200,000 page views there. And then there was another example where a client's keyword list meant that over 1.2 million impressions were not put in front of C-suites on our high net worth audience. And when in fact 90% of those were actually deemed safe. I'll just give you a couple of seconds just to digest this quote here, because it's important, I think, to read it in its entirety. And the importance around this, and it comes from the Chief Strategy Officer from Essence Mediacom, and I think it sums up that solution quite nicely, which is why I've not ad-libbed over it. But the important point here is that brand safety policies should not look to avoid news, but rather to avoid misinformation. And there's a difference between the two. And again, the quality of the environment is really key there. So can you build trust but not stifle campaigns? Is it possible? At the FT, our answer would be demand more from your premium partners, but you shouldn't be facing this challenge alone. So working with them is really important. So some advice would be use media owners who understand their media and the environment which is in. Trust them, but make them earn that trust. So challenge them all the time. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Don't be scared of any news content with even the smallest hint of negativity. Advertisers need to trust in not just the media environment, but also the tools that we're using, and trust in the ability of publishers to identify that negative sentiment. And just as a reference of what we do here at the FT, we have a disaster avoidance protocol already built in. So we do not serve ads next to any tragic news, such as like plane crashes or terrorism, for example. So trust that we're doing that on your behalf in any case, and we will hold that in the highest regard. Cool. So moving on to the next part, which is all around attention, really. So we talked a lot about the importance of trust here. It's an old metric. It's vital for success. But the second and potentially newer one is around the attention piece. It's a metric that's really crucial for judging if you're investing your marketing dollars wisely. And we're being asked more and more by brands and their agencies as to metrics that matter, and also, importantly, ones that drive measurable outcomes. We've seen with trusted news versus fake news that not all impressions are equal, and the environment in which they're seen is of vital importance. And consider into this that consumers are seeing up to 1,000 brand messages a day, proving that credibility is more important than ever. Joel referenced it a moment ago, but there's a recent Edelman Trust survey out recently that stated that nearly 3/4 of all consumers say transparency is more important than ever when it comes to brand messaging. And at the FT, that transparency piece means measuring beyond the traditional metrics. And to do this, we need to have the audience's attention. So given the increasing importance of this topic, we wanted to prove that the environment in which an ad is seen can really have a positive effect on a brand. So as is often the case at the FT, we did some research to see what we could find. So here we really wanted to understand how the FT's quality journalism and that premium environment really impacted on attention and therefore outcomes for brands. And then importantly for our clients, we wanted to prove that positive impact on performance and to understand exactly how quality journalism that we provide and the environment it sits in can directly impact on attention paid to advertising, and how that in turn can contribute to brand outcomes positively. So how did we do it? We worked with a company called Lumen to study the effect of eye tracking on ads. And Lumen is a leader in attention measurement, and it works with lots of media brands and publishers and major brands too across the industry. So we worked with them to employ its eye tracking technology to study the advertising attention of panel respondents reading FT articles. The study simulated like a natural reading experience, allowing participants to scroll freely when they were reading articles for up to 5 minutes. We tracked their eye movements, they were recorded throughout, and the methodology looked to establish links between the number of impressions served against those that were then viewable. And then what we did is we really drilled into the percentage of impressions that were actually seen and the duration in order to calculate a composite metric for attention seconds. The results were really interesting. And the research showed, maybe not unsurprising to the FT, but certainly something that backs up our overarching goals, is that we're really strong in terms of attention. And why is that? So some of the reasons would be because of the complex nature of the articles written in the FT. Our readers have a much slower scroll speed, which in turn increases the likelihood of ads being seen and then read. And the research also showed that ads on the FT are 28% more likely to be seen for every second of in-view time. Add into that the brand recall for these ads is 8 times higher than the publisher's set, and that's based on unaided recall. And lastly, tying into where we first began in the presentation, because our audience perceives the FT as trustworthy and premium and relevant, the impact of these stats becomes so much stronger. So where do we go from here? We're now working with a company called Adelaide to model out a product which will measure the percentage of impressions that were actually seen, plus the duration, to calculate that attention second metric. And that's something that we're working on and starting to roll out as a trial with a couple of clients, and should be ready to go to full market in the next quarter. So what does this approach allow us to do? It allows us to be to further the advancement of what we already had, sophisticated targeting strategies at our disposal. But for us, those attention metrics are not about endlessly optimizing the inventory towards the highest number of page views, but instead it's about figuring out the optimal level of attention needed in order to deliver those outcomes for clients. So it means looking at the scores. We need to have an optimal reach against reach and frequency to deliver the right audience in the right context. And that reach and frequency piece is not a new concept. Obviously, it's been around for decades even, but the application of it still really holds true. But when we optimize a targeted audience with that, based on our first-party data, we can then start to be really super efficient in the campaign exposure. And then add into that what we know about frequency and ad recall. As you can see here in the diagram, that impact becomes increasingly powerful when that multiplier effect starts to kick in. So when that is within all of that happening, all of those sophisticated strategies happening within that trusted content, that environment around a complex issue, and the time it takes to digest, you really start to help audiences to engage at that deeper level. So thanks for listening today. I hope you found it interesting and thought-provoking. Just 3 things to summarise before we get into the Q&A. Think about the environment your campaign sits in. There's proven positive uplift when you associate with premium publishers. Do challenge your media partners. Those that can prove their worth will. And then trust them to deliver your campaign in a deliberate and safe manner. And please understand that not all impressions are equal. Think beyond the impression towards the metrics that matter.
Thank you, Catherine. It's fantastic. And that work that you've done with Lumen and what you're describing, the future work with Adelaide is going to be so important, I think, and having the FT take the lead on that. You know, it'll be a fascinating one for our clients, and really fascinating to see how the industry follows, so that there's a potential to aggregate all of that, because there's been a very interesting trend the last 5 years or so in the demand gen side of stepping away from almost this drug of marketing qualified leads that people have been focused on. And it's kind of similar in some ways in the brand space, where impressions has become such a key metric. So taking a lead on stepping away from that feels massively important to the industry. Will be very exciting to see where that heads. So yeah, I think we've got time for a couple of questions. It'd be great to pick up on some of the things that you've mentioned, but maybe Catherine, just to start with you mentioned I guess this topic around negative keywords and the mistake that some brands make on using that as a blanket across all publishers without necessarily thinking about the safeguards or the context of the publisher. I'm interested, if there's any other mistakes that you think you see people making, or things that could be learnt from or improved on. And maybe start with you, Catherine, if there's anything else you'd add on.
Cool. Okay, thank you. The negative keyword list is a big one, and I sort of understand the rationale for that. But I think if you're working with a publisher that can help like identified the right ways of approaching it, it can be really helpful. Some other mistakes that we see is really from a media perspective is chasing scale at that low price, and then starting to evaluate complex media partnerships on like vanity metrics. We call them vanity metrics at the FT, like CTR. So moving towards a quality metric like attention is coming, but it's slow progress, and I think it's going to take some time to get the industry and the market to think about that. In terms of like thought leadership and branded content, so we do see that clients are pushing product instead of the themes. So people really want to be educated on a topic and learn something they didn't know. So not necessarily a sales spiel, so to speak. So I think those are probably the main things that I would call out.
Perfect. Thanks, Catherine. And Joel, yeah, this probably relates to my usual begging question of how do I make sure we win more awards? What are the things you're seeing that could help you? If you're okay to jump on mic and maybe chat through if there's a couple of mistakes you see people making when you've done that review of things. Oh, you're muted at the second, Joel. Sorry.
Sorry, I was muted. I think I'd probably talk more kind of generically about. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah, it's working.
No.
Yes. Yeah, all good. But you might have had a slightly slow connection.
Okay, sorry about that. I'll start again. So I think there's some more, less specifically maybe about the awards entries, but more generically about thought leadership. And one of the things which always occurs to me is that one common failing is to conflate content marketing and thought leadership. So you're doing kind of average content or even worse than average content and claiming that it's thought leadership. It doesn't have anything unique. It doesn't have anything, as Catherine said, that's going to make you really think. And you've been able to generate, sometimes you've been able to generate it quite quickly and easily. It's quick. It may look quite good, but it hasn't really got any depth or veracity to it. So that's a really common problem. And I think that's one of the challenges that people are conflating those two things. I think the other things we touched upon, is the kind of considering the whole funnel, making sure you're aware of its implications, top, middle, and bottom of the funnel, not just seeing it as a brand exercise, because it can be, or it obviously has massive power there, but you're looking to demonstrate impact on revenue, you've got to consider it all the way down the line. Wherever we stand on the MQL debate, Paul, and that's not enough time to get into that one today, is there? The last one is, I guess, one of the biggest problems with thought leadership, and this is whether it's a mistake, probably depends on your perspective, is this kind of what I see is there's kind of often random acts of thought leadership. So you might, particularly in professional services firm, you often have individuals who've got things to say, and they're ploughing their own furrow, as it were, but it's not often not particularly joined up, and it's not part of a big concerted campaign, and consequently you're not really getting the value of having an overall theme, again, as Catherine said, and a message which you can propagate over a protracted period of time and really generate ownership and authority around. And that's a hard battle to fight, and I think different people are entitled to have different opinions about whether that constitutes thought leadership. But I think in the context, I think the really powerful campaigns operate at a different level to those more random acts.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Joel. And the point you just made about connecting it right the way through in the sales team and in one of your examples really resonated with me. Like you can't have a situation where the company is going all out about a particular message in the market, and then when the sales team are in front of customers and the customer says, "Oh, I saw that piece from you in partnership with the FT, for example," and then the sales team say, "Oh, yeah, don't know what that's all about." You need to make sure these people have got a point of view and that it will at some stage follow through into that sales process that you've got. So yeah, that's a really interesting one. Maybe we've got time just for one more question. I'm interested in your points of view on what you think might be coming next, or if there's things that you are excited or hopeful to see people trying in the future. That would be really interesting to get a view on. Maybe Joel, if you wanted to go first.
Sure, Paul. I think I'm just getting some internet issue, so forgive me if I'm not quite getting all the sense of what you're saying. Hopefully, it'll come through in the recording fine. You ask about what's interesting stuff we're seeing in the future. Is that what you asked?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. Oh, we might have lost you, Joel. Catherine, if you wanted to take that, I'll drop Joel a note in the chat.
Of course, maybe he'll come back in a sec.
Yeah.
So something that I think I'd love to see brands trying, I think, first of all, like thinking long term as opposed to campaign by campaign. I think when we do work much on a broader scale, so not quite on a short term campaign, that is something that can really help. So it'd be great to see clients who want to be more ambitious from that perspective. And then also, it would be great to see brands being really brave about a particular purpose or a particular mission, so that it will help us to create some really impactful campaigns. So maybe thinking less about case studies and internal voices, but more about partnering with like-minded brands or publishers to make something that can really affect change. So what might that look like at the FT? Something like partnering alongside some of our wider initiatives around financial literacy, for example, or maybe one of our schools programs or something like that, that just sort of takes it one step further. So yeah, I think that's probably how I would answer that question.
That's a great point. Actually doing something rather than just talking constantly. Yeah, and that tends to be the sort of stuff that people respect or want to share or engage with. Yeah, really, sure. Yeah. Really good thought. And Joel, yeah, if you're back with us, yes, exactly that question on anything you're excited about seeing next or things that you'd love to see people trying.
I think what I'd really like to see is a probably better integration of thought leadership and kind of pure creativity, because sometimes the thought leadership campaigns are great and really worthy and have tremendous impact, but you don't see the kind of full creative potential of them unleashed. And there are a couple of examples that we saw, you know, in the entries, which, you know, it's not the same as the best use of creative category, for example, but we had there was a campaign for Bango where they tried to completely rebrand their whole technical product as a digital vending machine. They really went to try to change perceptions or expectations of what it was and see it through a very creative lens. You know, we talked about another example as kind of anti-expert positioning. So you're looking at knowledge gaps rather than presenting perfection. So you're trying to spin the whole thing on its head. It's about thought leadership as showing that you don't know everything and that you're trying to improve your knowledge, and it's about sharing these things as well. And then you get it on a kind of consumer level. I think there's an element of this being trite, but, you know, integrating celebrities, and there's a few examples of that with Roger Federer, for example. All of a sudden, you and I talked about this, Paul. We were seeing celebrities in B2B now, which is quite interesting, and it's quite novel for those of us who've been in there for a long time, when it didn't have that kind of star-studded aspect to it. So there's definitely some things to try, and I think it'd be really great for people to try and really push the envelope of what that looks like. I guess the challenge is to hang on to the core kind of authority piece, and that's stretching between those two things can be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned earlier as well, Joel, that one of your examples that was approaching the Netflix style of content, and I think, for me, that's something I'd find really exciting. I think that we're in a space where, you know, Hollywood is making, and Netflix are making really interesting business style content. There's a whole film about, you know, the intellectual property rights around Tetris, for example. So it can't be beyond the wit of our clients and the wider industry to create that type of long format, exciting content about their journeys. There's some really interesting stuff going on in this space. So yeah, that's my wish for the future, and it probably ties to that celebrity point as well. Giving a bit of Hollywood glamour certainly wouldn't hurt. But yeah, I think just wanted to say thank you so much, Catherine, Joel, for packing a hell of a lot into quite a short, condensed period of time. If this whole week is about the topic of attention, I think we've really brought it home to talk about why would you want to capture attention in the first place, and how might you capture that attention when you think about, you know, premium thought leadership and that type of presence. So yeah, thank you so much for your time and contributions to both of you.
Great. Thanks for having me.